Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Tatiana Suarez to defeat Weili Zhang. Yeah, Weili's incredible, no shit. But how's she gonna deal with superior wrestling? You ever thought of that? You fucking jerk off? No, you haven't. Have you? Alright. I am here to break down UFC Fight Night 250 fuck Cannonier versus Rodrigues. Okay, in the first fight of the night, we have Julia Avila taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti. My prediction here is Cavalcanti wins, and I've got her winning by decision. Even though I don't think she is the most likely candidate to follow the blueprint that's been laid out on how to defeat Julia Avila with her losses to Sijara Eubanks and Misha Tate. There's another one, but it's like a thumb injury, so whatever. But even though Cavalcanti isn't the most willing grappler like that, I still think she's got a distinct advantage on the feet, and I like her traits as a fighter, and I think she should be able to find a whole new way to beat Julia Avila by being the sharper fighter on the feet, fighting well on the back foot, and when Julia does corral her and she's able to make this a more physical fight, Julia might be stronger, but in general, Jacqueline is strong herself and she's a little bigger. So I don't think she's going to be bulldozed easily and ragdolled. And in general, I think she'll be able to keep herself on her feet. And look, Avila, she's never been beaten there. And it's not like she's got any negative traits about her. It's just she's got too much going against her circumstantially, where I think she's got to be in worse shape as an athlete physically. She's almost 37 years old. She's had multiple knee surgeries on both knees, which theoretically might make her stronger. What the fuck do I know? But in general, circumstantially, she's had one performance, one fight in the last 4 years, and it was the worst fight she's ever had, where she was shut out against Misha Tate and ultimately finished for the first time in round 3. So just circumstantially, the girl that shows back up and she's 37 and she's got more gray hair than any other fighter. It's, I imagine she's going to be up against it physically against Jacqueline Cavalcanti and athletically, really. I think Avila will, in general, be trying to slow this fight down by grabbing a hold of Cavalcanti. It could happen, and I might bet on it. I'm just that kind of jerk off. But I have to go with Julia Avila winning here. I'm sorry, with Jacqueline Cavalcanti winning here. I think, again, she's going to be too tough, too fast to just corral easily on the feet. Really comfortable striking, even if you're bringing the pressure. And I think her footwork and her strikes themselves are sharper than Julia Avila's, faster. So I just see a distinct advantage there. And I've got her winning a decision over the course of 15 minutes. Probably not going to bet on anything on the Cavalcanti side. Maybe I'll play Avila by decision or plus points with some fucking chump change, $2,000, 2,500. I don't know. I'll keep it low. But either way, the prediction with a gun to my head, no doubt, is Cavalcanti winning by decision. Next up, we have Walter Walker versus Don'Tale Mayes. My prediction here is Walter Walker wins, and I've got him winning by round 3 TKO. The basis for the prediction is I think he will out-hustle Don'Tale Mayes, and I think he will out-wrestle Don'Tale Mayes. That Walter Walker is Marab or something. But he's definitely a guy who's got deceptively good cardio and takedowns. Don't get me wrong, he's a sloppy mess of a fighter. And yeah, he lost to Lucas Dreschke. But even in that fight, I like the traits he showed in round 3. Getting on top of him, advancing and getting the mount, where even though the fight was close, if it went the other way and Walter Walker won that decision, you would have to attribute his victory to his round 3 effort. So yeah, he's definitely a guy who, and not just in that fight, coming into the UFC, before he got to the UFC, he's been able to hit those clutch takedowns in some competitive fights and force stoppages and takeover fights and score victories. So While I don't think these traits are going to carry him to the top of the UFC's heavyweight division, I think at some point or another he's going to run into someone who's got too many skills, and these traits aren't going to be available for him. But here in this fight, it's another lower end heavyweight fight. I mean, Dantel's middle of the road UFC heavyweight. He's a solid fighter. But I still think Walter Walker will have that extra bit of hustle. And if he is able to get on top of Dantel, being one of the few guys that can match him in size, I think Dantel is going to slow down, have a hard time shaking him loose, and start to fatigue. And if Walter Walker is able to hit those clutch takedowns down the stretch on a fatigued Dontel Mays, I envision him forcing a finish. Dontel's been beaten 7 times. He has been finished 3 times, and they were all down the stretch. He was submitted twice against Rodrigo Nascimento and Cyril Gahn, who got him with a round 3 heel hook. And then he was TKO'd by Alan Crowder in an exhausting Dana White's Contender Series fight way back when. And all these losses, frankly, are way back when. He's had 3 or 4 losses since then, and they've all been by decision. He's been able to stand tall in defeat, even against guys like Rodrigo Nascimento, the guy that submitted him. He beat him last year, as well as Shamil Gaziev, who did as well. Shamil Gaziev's a solid finisher. So yeah, it's not like Dontel Mays is going to totally collapse, but I still think Walter Walker can suck some of the life out of him and remind him what it's like to fight on exhaustion, being another 6'6" giant. Of course, if these guys aren't grappling, I don't think either one of them will fatigue. And I'd favor Dontel Mays in general, slightly on the feet. I think Dontel hits harder, and he's been to war for 15 minutes. Without any takedowns, I know Walter Walker can hang on the feet, but even though I've never seen him knocked out or even really clipped too badly, I still think Dontel's got that scary power where I would envision him getting the better of Walter Walker, whether it's a knockout or a decision. But I do think Walter will be able to mix things up, hit those takedowns, and slowly but surely fatigue Dontel Mays and take over the fight. So that is the prediction. I've got Walter Walker doing that and advancing on him with this ground game throughout the course of the fight. And in the end, getting a full mount and pounding him out, kind of like Alan Crowder did. And there's a chance this one looks just as sloppy. Next up, we have Vince Morales versus Elijah Smith. My prediction for this fight is Vince Morales wins, and I've got him winning by round 3 knockout. And the basis for the prediction is that's the one way in which Elijah Smith has lost. So I'll go with that. No, but that was his one loss to Junior Cortez, which is a forgivable loss because that guy's a really good fighter. And he did also take that fight at a really tough time in his career where he only had 2 professional fights. So it's kind of a forgivable loss, definitely. It doesn't look bad on his record. But in general, he's still only 22 years old, despite all of his potential, and he's got a fucking ton of it. He's still only 22 years old. He's only got 8 professional fights, and he's fighting a guy in Vince Morales, who I think is in his prime right now. And in general, I think he just brings a tough matchup for Elijah Smith with his traits. That guy's really durable, really dangerous. He's got heart, and he's got a wealth of experience to back it all up, and high level experience too. Even since leaving the UFC in his first stint, he looked really sharp, and he had 5 fights, and he got 4 finishes, 3 of which were by submission, which is a new wrinkle to his game. He's gotten submissions before, but now he certainly looks more dangerous. And all these wins were down the stretch and against UFC level fighters. Even his one decision victory he got in that stretch and the rest of it. He looked really good, and then he came back on short notice and ran into Taylor Lapulus, and it kind of put a halt to that momentum. But I still trust that he's in his prime, and he's the same fighter that's been kicking ass, and I think that guy's going to be too much for any 22-year-old kid. Could be wrong. Elijah Smith could be John Bones Jones or whatever, but he's already run into a wall, so he's not John Bones Jones. He does have one loss. It's to Junior Cortez, who is a UFC level fighter. I'm sure he believed in himself and he was very competitive in the fight up until he wasn't. He slowed down in round 3 and Junior was able to catch him and then he caught him and he knocked him out. It wasn't just cardio, he got knocked out. So it's half a strike against his chin. Not that that's the biggest concern moving forward, but it's something. And I am betting against it, I guess, and picking against it. But also the round 3 thing. Because also in his last fight against Aaron Tao in the Contender Series, he noticeably slowed down. I did like that he fought through that and even like threw down, but he still slowed down in round 3. And in general, I thought he was a half step behind. Not that it fucking mattered. But yeah, he's learning, and it wouldn't surprise me if he's patched up all these holes already. But in general, there's still more holes to be found, and I think Vince Morales, especially the Vince Morales I've seen as of late, is going to be too much for him. Vince has never been knocked out. He's got a rock solid chin on him, and the chin is what you have to worry about here. His one TKO loss comes due to leg kicks from Chris Gutierrez, which is very forgivable because that guy is one of the best leg kickers in the UFC. And even though I talked about his submission game coming along lately, which in general I think speaks to his submission game overall, offense and defense getting better, but he still has been submitted twice. He was submitted with an armbar from the guard against this guy Josh Wick in a fight that he was winning but got a little too lackadaisical. And then he got submitted against Domingo Pilarte on the Contender Series way back when. Needless to say, with that being his only submission loss in the last decade, it's forgivable. Domingo Pilarte was really talented, and certainly he's got more to offer on the ground than Elijah Smith does at this point. Although, again, he's 22 years old. Maybe he's fucking Jacare on the mat, and I just don't know that yet. But speaking of the mat, I do think Elijah Smith will be able to get Vince Morales down, but I don't think it'll be worth the energy. Vince Morales is a tough guy to get down in the first place, but he's a really tough guy to hold down. I don't think that's a sustainable path to victory for 15 minutes. Could be wrong. I mean, again, the sky's the limit with Elijah Smith, but I think Vince Morales can make that difficult for any fighter. And in general, no, even if he's losing round 1, which I half expect him to, I think Vince Morales will still be standing at the end of round 1. His chin will be there for him. And I know his cardio, his heart, and his well-rounded game will be there for him. And I think he's going to drag Elijah into deep waters and make him pay for it again with a round 3 finish, if not a decision or whatever the fuck. But yeah, I got Vince Morales taking over this fight. And that is certainly the fucking bet. Next up, we have Gabriel Bonfim versus Khaos Williams. My prediction here is Bonfim wins, and I've got him winning by submission. Khaos Williams has never been finished, so he's never been submitted. But Gabriel Bonfim is just exceptionally dangerous, and that's really the basis for the prediction. This guy has killer submission skills, and I think he could hand a lot of UFC fighters their first submission loss. He's also really good on the feet. Gabriel Bonfim has really sharp boxing, which I think could help lead him to this submission win. But I do expect him to be the cleaner striker on the feet while he's fresh. I think his jab especially, but in general, his sharper, straighter punches will be scoring more points and be more effective than the power-based striking of Khaos Williams. Khaos does have power, though. He's got that equalizer where he can knock anybody out in 30 seconds, as he's done to Alex Morono and Abdul Razak Al Hassan. He was the first guy to do it. And he could also knock guys out late, like he did with Miguel Baeza in round 3, which I thought was a great look. And that's really the win I would look to more for his path to victory over Gabriel Bonfim. I think just looking at Bonfim's loss to Dalby, Khaos Williams has to slow him down. He's got to bypass that jab, and he's got to do so with strikes, because I think if Khaos Williams tries to make this a physical battle and get in tight on Bonfim, he could find himself in trouble. And that is the prediction, really, that he has trouble dealing with the striking, forces his way inside, and has his neck taken. But yeah, even if I'm wrong about that, and part of me kind of hopes I am, yeah, he's got to watch out in tight, no matter what, with Gabriel Bonfim. But he's got to find ways to slow him down other than getting in tight, and that's using his power in the right spots, to the body and to the legs, and beating him up. Because I think Gabriel Bonfim is going to keep himself safe from the big chin shots, and I do think in general he's winning the points battle on the feet. He did win his first decision over Angelosa, which was a good look, even though that wasn't the most taxing fight for him. Not to say he was in cruise control, but I still worry about him if he gets dragged into a competitive fight where he's getting hurt. But yeah, he did win a decision against Angelosa, and that was a good look, especially after the cardio collapse in his previous fight, which again is his only loss to Nicholas Dalby. And I have to say, he's won plenty of times down the stretch before coming to the UFC, Gabriel Bonfim. Round two, plenty of times. His first four victories, I think, are all in round two. And he's even won in round three. So he is capable of winning down the stretch by knockout and submission. But at the UFC level, it's like a brand new fighter. And I don't know if it's a brand new problem, but that Nicholas Dalby thing is a big stain. It's a big loss, and it definitely looks like a potential problem moving forward for Gabriel Bonfim. If you would ask me what I worry about the most about him as a fighter, and it would be his cardio. I think if this guy gets into a competitive fight, he'll be falling off a cliff potentially. So Khaos has to make him work, but I'm picking Gabriel Bonfim. Much like Khaos Williams, he's got that equalizer, that 30-second danger in the form of his submission skills. And by the way, if he gets on top of anybody, he can go through you methodically as well. It's not all just opportunistic guillotines, but maybe the 30-second submissions are. But my point is, yeah, he's dangerous from the get-go. He can close the show early. And I think over the course of 15 minutes, I do worry about him against Khaos Williams, but not nearly in the way that I would have, or probably should have, against Nicholas Dalby. Because Dalby is just a real workhorse. But yeah, Khaos Williams, he's been scratching and clawing at the UFC level, really accustomed to fighting 15-minute competitive fights. And he's definitely the guy that I trust more going longer. So even though his chances may not skyrocket in rounds 2 and 3 like Nicholas Dalby's do with his pressure, I still think his chances definitely go up down the stretch against Gabriel Bonfim. But yeah, Bonfim's the pick, and I'm taking it to happen early. With his submission skills, I'll go with a guillotine in round one, despite all that horseshit I just said over the last 5 minutes. Next up, we have Rafael Estevam versus Jesus Santos Aguilar. My prediction for this fight is Estevam wins, and I'll go with him winning by decision, even though Jesus Santos Aguilar has only lost twice, and they're both submission losses. But I guess I'll look to that win over Mateus Mendonça and say Rafael Estevam wins by decision. Estevam is 12-0. There's no doubts in him so far. And even though he didn't finish strongly against Charles Johnson, he still beat Charles Johnson in his UFC debut, which is a great look. He took him down 42 times and then failed 42 times in round 3 and was getting outstruck. But survived, kept himself in the 10-9 realm in round 3, and he beat Charles Johnson, which is a win that has aged very well, even though it probably didn't mean much just a year and a half ago when he got that win. But that's certainly a great win. Before that, he got a nice TKO on the ground on the Contender Series against Joao Elias. That guy's a really slick grappler, and he shut down his grappling game and put the guy away on the ground. And he's got 4 TKO victories, 3 submissions, but even those TKOs, they could all be on the ground. I might have seen all of them. I've never seen him get a finish that was on the feet. This guy takes you down and wears you down, or takes you down and advances on you and puts you away. I don't know if he's going to be able to advance on Jesus Santos Aguilar, and I don't know if he's going to be able to relax, because Jesus Santos Aguilar has an incredible guillotine. It's the best weapon in this matchup or any other matchup of his. The guy's got a monster guillotine, and he's been able to close a show in rounds 1, round 2, round 3, round 5. I don't know about round 2, but definitely 3 and 5. And against good fighters as well. Edgar Chairez, currently in the UFC. He got that nice win over Stuart Nickel in round 1. He got the win over Erickson Fajeda in round 3. The guy's a really dangerous guillotine artist, and you can never relax. And of course, a guillotine is probably the most opportunistic submission there is. So yeah, you can never relax with him, and his last fight was a great reminder of that. But he's got 2 losses himself, and they are both by submission. He was submitted in his debut 10 years ago, so whatever. Uh, you can just forget that. And his next loss was to Tatsuro Taira by triangle armbar. And you can kind of forgive that because it's Tatsuro Taira. But yeah, I still, like I mentioned, I thought he lost that fight to Mateus Mendonça last year. Whatever, it went his way, and I'm kind of glad it did because he's a really fun fighter to watch, Jesus Santos Aguilar. But I think here he's going to be reliant on that guillotine. Or if he is able to stuff the takedowns, I think he's better on the feet. Rafael Estevam leaves a lot to be desired on the feet. The guy's got sloppy striking, throws a lot of like fucking hammer fists, and it's aggression. You know, he's aggressive, and it's all a means to an end. Like I said, as TKOs take place on the ground, that's where he wants to fight. But still, he's got height and reach, and maybe he can make things work for him here. But I think he's up against it against most fighters in the UFC on the feet. And I think Jesus Santos Aguilar, even though he doesn't have too many knockouts on his record, just one, I still think he hits pretty fucking hard. And I think he could give Estevam trouble, especially in round 3 if he can make him tired and whatever, like we saw against Charles Johnson. Although he's got half the height and reach of Charles Johnson. So there's that. But on the ground, I do think positionally Estevam wins this fight. Aguilar, he's good. He's got good sweeps and takedowns and the rest of it. But I think positionally, he's losing the points battle to Rafael Estevam. And in general, he's reliant on the submission, on the guillotine choke. Because despite that shit I said about them fighting on the feet, I do think Estevam will take him down. The guy's got good takedowns, and I think Jesus Santos Aguilar is certainly takedownable, and probably because he wants to be because of his guillotine. But I think Estevam and any fighter fighting Jesus Santos Aguilar has had a team prepare him for the guillotine for a few weeks, if not months now, and I've got him getting by that and winning this fight with control. He's got some good submission skills himself, Estevam. He got 3 subs on his record. One really nice armbar that he hit in a transition, even though I didn't lock it down too firmly or whatever. But yeah, he's got another rear naked choke, arm triangle. He's been able to put guys away down the stretch, which is a great look. Even though I think that arm triangle or the rear naked is bullshit. There's one of them that's bullshit, and it was in round 1. But either fucking way. I do think Rafael Estevam, his primary path to victory by far is a decision here, despite the 2 submission losses for Jesus Santos Aguilar. But if I'm wrong, maybe he could overwhelm him with his grappling control and get a submission down the stretch. Still, the prediction is Rafael Estevam wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And I know coming back on the other side, I will play Jesus Santos Aguilar by submission, because I think that's his primary path to victory, and it should be at inflated odds. Although everybody's onto it by now, so maybe it'll be identical to his money line and not worth betting on at all. Next up, we have Angela Hill versus Ketlin Souza. My prediction for this fight is Angela Hill wins, and I've got her winning by decision. I think Ketlin Souza is a dangerous girl, but I trust the chin and the overall durability to stand up to strikes from Angela Hill against anybody. This is the girl who's throwing down with Jessica Andrade in her prime. And I trust her submission defense as well. She's been submitted twice, and they were way back when to Rose Namajunas and to Carla Esparza, fucking world champions. And since then, she's fought everybody else in the world, including Mackenzie Dern, who was working her over for 25 minutes, and nobody's been able to finish her since Rose Namajunas. And also, she's 40 years old. So, yeah, any minute now, she could turn from Angela Overkill Hill to Angela Over the Hill Kill. I don't know. But either way, I still think she's looked really good in general as of late. Yeah, I thought she lost to Tabitha Ricci, but Ricci is still a really talented fighter. I think Angela Hill is going to be the faster, more active fighter on the outside against Ketlin Souza. And of course, on the inside, she can get really rough in the clinch. And she got a nice guillotine, her first submission victory last year against Luana Pinheiro, which I bring up because Ketlin Souza's only got 4 losses, all 4 of which are finishes, which doesn't mean too much, or I wouldn't be picking Hill to win by decision. But it still is unusual and might be worth wasting some money on props. But yeah, she's been beaten 4 times by finish. She was submitted twice, submitted in her UFC debut against Karine Silva, who's a fucking monster despite her recent loss. And she was submitted early in her career to Fabiolane Mello, with an armbar. And then she was knocked out twice as well, once with leg kicks inside 90 seconds to Diane Cardoso. I wasn't able to see that, but I'd fucking love to, even though Sherdog has it listed as punches. So it's one or the other, maybe both. And she lost to Ariane Carnelossi with a body kick in round 3. And I do know what that looks like because I saw it. And of course, I know what Ariane Carnelossi looks like, and she looks like Chad Mendez. So, little forgiveness there, perhaps. But Ketlin Souza, despite being finished in these losses, she's still very dangerous herself for a woman. She's got 8 TKOs or knockouts in her 15 wins and just 2 submissions, but getting her second submission in her last fight over Yasmin Haragui was amazing, even if the ball only got rolling because she knocked her down, which she did. But still, closing the show with a rear naked choke was a good look. Because if you ask me, that's her or anybody's best chance of finishing Angela Hill. It's the rear naked choke. Angela Hill, without even looking at her record, she was submitted by Carla Esparza, but she was submitted by Ronda Marcos with the armbar. I know my shit. I saw all this shit. But yeah, Ketlin Souza, I think she is more dangerous. I think she is more physical. But I think Angela Hill is a proven workhorse. And I've got her outpointing Ketlin Souza for 15 minutes. I think Ketlin Souza was afforded more comfort in a 15-minute fight with Marnik Man. But here she's got a real workhorse that's going to take her to the next level. And look, before Souza got to the UFC, she was winning decisions and doing them against good fighters and even 5-rounders. But I still don't think I still don't think these girls bring the fight that Angela Hill does. And I think Angela Hill, at 40 years old, is still incredibly sharp. And I think she's going to be too much for the 30-year-old with her pace. How's that for a stupid prediction? So yeah, Angela Hill by decision is the pick. And I've bet on Angela Hill, and I'll wait to see what the fuck else. Next up, we have Jose Delgado versus Connor Matthews. My prediction for this fight is Delgado wins, and I've got him winning by knockout. I think he's a really talented fighter, ferocious and versatile. And Connor Matthews, I still have a little bit of doubt about his durability. Of course, he was TKO'd for the first time as a pro against Dennis Bazooka in his last fight. That was in round 3, and he was tired, but he was clipped and dropped and put away. And he was also knocked out twice as an amateur. I haven't seen these fights, even though you know I've tried, but they're both listed as knockouts, and one of them is a head kick in 4 seconds, so there's no mistaking that for a TKO. I definitely have doubts about his durability, especially after the Bazooka fight and the Francis Marshall fight. He lost on the Contender Series his first Contender Series fight, because he actually came back to the Contender Series and beat this guy Jair something and looked good, winning a decision there. But yeah, he's still a guy that I have doubts about his durability moving forward. And I think Jose Delgado really brings a dangerous storm. This guy's definitely got power in his hands, but he's also ferocious. He'll come try to destroy you with knees. He's got a really solid rear front kick, for his left kick anyway, and I might switch stances or whatever, but he flicks that thing out, and it's really dangerous and quick. And he's also a dangerous submission artist as well. He's got 4 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission as a pro, and he's been able to close the show mostly in round 1, but a few times in round 3, each way. His one loss is to this guy, Chris Makate, who was able to out wrestle him. The guy's a wrestler, and he totally won that fight with wrestling for 15 minutes. There was a point where he kind of uh, caught a kick and clipped him. I don't know if it counts as a knockdown or whatever, but still, it was pure wrestling, really. But in the fight against Alberto Romo, he was hurt early on. He got a round 3 TKO there, which is a great fucking look, especially because, again, he was hurt in round 1 against that guy, Alberto Romo. Not that I'm saying he's got a weak chin or whatever. I'm just saying he's got 9 fights, and what else is there to look to when you're speculating on weaknesses? But yeah, the guy is still really sharp. He's ferocious and aggressive, and I think he's gonna bring a ferocious and an aggressive type of fight where it's more conducive of a finish. And I've got Jose Delgado's danger being too much for the chin of Connor Matthews and knocking him out. Maybe doing so in tight, roughing him up in the clinch, or just catching him on the outside with one of those kicks, like apparently Matthews got knocked out with as an amateur. But Matthews, he's definitely got some great submission skills. He's got 5 submissions in his 7 victories, but he's definitely not as big of a grappler as his record would indicate. Still, though, it's good that he's been able to find these subs. Almost all of them by rear naked choke. One of them's a neck crank, so whatever. But yeah, it's good that he's got that finishing touchdown there. But here against Delgado, who was beaten by wrestling, like I said, that's responsible for his one loss. But I don't think Connor Matthews is going to be quick enough or strong enough to go through him in that regard, in that realm. And on the feet, I'm not saying Connor Matthews can't get the best of Jose Delgado, but I think Jose Delgado is both more dangerous and more durable. So uh, I've got that being his fight. So I've got Delgado winning, and I've got him winning by knockout in round 1. Jose Delgado. Next up, we have Andre Petroski versus Rodolfo Vieira. My prediction for this fight is Rodolfo wins, and I've got him winning by submission. Round 2, I guess. I don't know. But that is based on him getting takedowns, which could be difficult because Andre Petroski is built like a brick shithouse. And on that physicality level alone, I think he makes this a very interesting and potentially difficult matchup for Vieira. But the thing is, Adolfo Vieira is not a total fish out of water on the ground. On the feet, I mean, or on the ground, I guess. But he's not a total fish out of water. I don't think he's the jiu-jitsu guy on the feet. And I think he is a technical match for Andre Petroski. I do think Petroski hits harder, but on the flip side, I think Vieira is probably more durable. So it's interesting, even if he's not able to get the takedown. I think he's very much in the fight. But I do think, of course, if he gets on top of Andre Petroski, he's going to close the show. Petroski's a really comfortable grappler, but he's been finished a few times, and Rodolfo Vieira is more dangerous than anybody he's ever fought. There is a chance Petroski can follow the blueprint of Anthony Fluffy Hernandez and outlast Vieira and put him away down the stretch. And you know I'll be fucking wasting money on that. But I still think Vieira will be winning that battle. I think first of all, I'm sure he's worked so hard to never let that happen again, because that was a pretty embarrassing loss for him, I'm sure. But secondly, He's much like Petroski. He's answered questions since a cardio collapse by getting wins down the stretch, including in round 3, like he did over Dustin Stoltzfus in his next fight. Petroski had that same thing. He lost to uh, the fuck's his name, Aaron Jeffrey. Aaron Jeffrey, and he lost to Brian Battle, and he came into the UFC saying, "I can't go past 8 minutes. I have to work on that." And his first 2 victories were round 3 finishes, which is a great look. Both guys have had cardio failures in the past, and I know they've worked on it. But I do think, of course, Adolfo Vieira is still much more dangerous when things are going his way in this matchup. And even when things aren't going his way, and by that I mean when these guys are on the feet, I do think Adolfo Vieira's got some better traits on his side. I didn't like the way Petroski looked, certainly against Jacob Malkoun, whatever happened there, if I can quote fucking Carmine Lupertazzi Jr., you Sopranos fans. And also, he got knocked out by Michel Pereira, who's fucking incredibly athletic, acrobatic, and dangerous and powerful. So there's a little forgiveness there. And Rodolfo Vieira doesn't have those traits, but he's still a big, strong guy, and he probably throws a big, strong punch. And I'm just worried in general about the durability of Petroski. So, yeah, I do think this has the potential to be a stylistically unfavorable fight for both guys. But I'm going with Vieira here. I think if things go his way, they go his way in a big way. And I think if they don't, he's still very much in the striking fight with Andre Petroski. And I think, I favor him to win. Rodolfo Vieira by submission is the pick because I'm going with it happening his way. And I'll take it in round 2. Next up, we have Nazim Sadykhov versus Ismail Bonfim. My prediction here is Bonfim wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that I think Sadykhov is going to be looking to strike, and I think he's going to be facing a superior striker here in Ismail Bonfim. He's going to be a little sharper, and I think perhaps even a little more dangerous, and he's very comfortable fighting on his feet for 15 minutes. The way to make him uncomfortable and the way to defeat him is to take him to the mat. He's got 4 losses, Bonfim, and they're all by round 1 submission. 3 losses take place over a decade ago, and at least 2 of them are to excellent fighters. So it's kind of forgivable. But I still feel like it's no coincidence that his 1 loss in the last decade has also been a round 1 submission. And that was to Benoit Saint-Denis, who is an incredible fucking fighter, obviously. But yeah, they're all to good fighters and they're all whatever, but he lost in round 1 by submission 4 times. I don't think Sadykhov would be able to go through him with a submission in round 1, even though he's a little underrated on the ground. But I still think it would be great for him. It would behoove him if he was to hit takedowns on Bonfim and mix it up. Might open up his striking and might slow down Bonfim's striking. Probably will at the same time. So Sadykhov, who's definitely always going to be more of a striker, but he's mixed in grappling. He's definitely no stranger there. We've watched him hit takedowns in his UFC fights. And I think here he would really need to do so to find success against Bonfim. Sadykhov lost once, and it wasn't his debut. He was submitted. You can kind of dismiss it because it was his debut. And since then, it's been nothing but victories up until his last loss, or his last fight, which was a draw against Slavakos. Slavakos won all the small moments and really worked them with his body shots and the combination striking. But Sadykhov clipped him with a head kick and had him really badly hurt and dominated him on the ground as well. And was able to secure a 10-8 round and not lose that fight. Walking away with a draw. Still, though, I do think, even though Slavakos may be a different type of striker than Bonfim, much like him, though, has excellent hands. And I think he's a little healthier and more trustworthy and probably a little sharper as well, a little quicker. And I think on the feet, without slowing him down, he gets the better of Nazim Sadykhov. Without any head kicks or takedowns, slowing down Ismail Bonfim, his technique should carry him to a victory. And that is the prediction here. I'm taking Ismail Bonfim. I like the way he looked over Vince Pichel, even though Vince Pichel, whatever, he's older and weathered and whatever, but that's still a good 3-round victory. He's won plenty of 3-round fights at a high level in the LFA and wherever else. And I think here, I got him walking away with a decision. Ismail Bonfim via superior striking. And I have bet on him. Next up, we have Edmen Shahbazyan taking on Dylan Budka. My prediction for this fight is Shahbazyan wins, and I'm going to go with him winning by a round 1 destruction. And I will look to cover that with a bet. But on the flip side, I will definitely cover the Dylan Budka winning by Edmen Shahbazyan collapsing prop bets. I do think Edmen Shahbazyan is one of the least trustworthy fighters down the stretch. And even though Dylan Budka may not be on the level of the guys that have beaten Edmen Shahbazyan, there's still such definitive traits that I would bet on them even if he was fighting me. And I'm a pussy. So there's that. But yeah, it's just too definitive. The traits on the downside is negative traits where, I'll bet on them. And Dylan Budka, he's only been TKO'd once, and it was the Cesar Almeida. So not the worst look there. And he's also been in some competitive fights. Had a good victory on the Contender Series over Chad Hankum. Got a nice decision win there, battling hard in the end of that fight. And had a 5-round war with Azamat Bakoyev, who just knocked out Zachary Reese, I think. I don't know. Whoever he knocked out there, yeah. He made his debut in the UFC a few weeks ago and looked great. And here he's here he fought Dylan Budka, and Dylan Budka lost a 5-round split decision to him, but still showed a lot of grit and a lot of heart and the rest of it. The type of shit that would lead to a late finish over Edmen Shahbazyan. But yeah, he's shown traits on plenty of occasions, but I still think technically he's up against it against Edmen Shahbazyan. And even though Dylan Budka's a wrestler, I don't think he's going to be able to get in on Edmen Shahbazyan early. Edmen, I think when he's firing on all cylinders, he's a difficult athlete to conquer. And I think he's going to be too fast and too dangerous for Dylan Budka. And I've got him putting him away with a finish. Kind of like he did to Brad Tavares way back when he was the greatest prospect in the sport. But yeah, Edmen Shahbazyan, it is a cardio collapse every time. He's lost 5 fights, once by decision to Jack Hermanson, which was also a cardio collapse, and then finishes 2 in round 2, 2 in round 3. I said all this same shit when he fought Gerald Mearshart, and believe me, I don't remember the specifics, but I profited from his loss to Gerald Mearshart, even though I picked him to win by round 1 knockout. Now, Mearshart is a guy who closes the show down the stretch. He's a reliable rallier and a submission artist in rounds 2 and 3. Dylan Budka is not. I mean, he can certainly do it, but he's not as reliable as Mearshart like that. So it's not just, that was a more of a stronger bet on a fighter that I picked against because I had the upside of Mearshart and the downside of Shahbazyan. Here, it's much more some wasted sprinkles on the downside of Shahbazyan. And I have to see what his knockout props look like. Because I do think if he wins, it's knockout. Round 1 or 2. The guy's ferocious. And even though I wouldn't say Dylan Budka has a weak chin or whatever, he's definitely been hurt on more than one occasion. We saw him get finished in his UFC debut. And ferocious Shahbazyan, if he wins this fight, knockout is far and away the most likely outcome. So yeah, Shahbazyan by knockout is the pick. The bets are going every which way, and you are talking to the jerk off who won like $25 off of Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato going to a draw. So keep that in mind. And in the co-main event, we have Yusuf Zalal versus Calvin Kattar. My prediction for this fight is Calvin Kattar wins by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that I think he's underrated right now. He's got 3 consecutive losses, only one of which is truly legitimate. And despite being almost 37 years old and not having won a fight in many years, I still think when you add the context to his losses, dismissing that Arnold Allen loss, and certainly the TKO part of it, and that Josh Emmett loss, which was a 5-round war that could have gone either way and probably should have gone the other way. I don't know. But regardless, I don't think Calvin Kattar's in such bad standing right now. His one legitimate loss as of late was to Aljamain Sterling. And Aljo, who despite coming up from 135, he has that physicality in wrestling that Yusuf Zalal does not have. Zalal's an excellent grappler, but Aljo was able to use his strength and I think put the fear into Calvin Kattar that even helped shut him down on the feet, where when they were at range, Kattar's boxing never came alive. Aljo was too fast, and once they got in tight, too strong. But yeah, that I'm not saying it was a great loss or whatever, but it's still a former champion in Aljamain Sterling, and he's a unique grappler. So I don't think it's a loss that could be duplicated by Yusuf Zalal. And I think with Calvin Kattar's takedown defense being really strong in the first place, he'll be able to get his wish and keep this one standing. And even though Yusuf Zalal is solid on the feet, I still think Calvin Kattar's boxing is the best weapon, the best skill set. And I've got that carrying him to a decision victory. First of all, Kattar has, again, never been knocked out legitimately, and he's only been submitted once, and that was way back in 2008. So I'm not saying Yusuf Zalal can't get it done, but it shouldn't happen. He shouldn't be finished by anybody these days. And for Yusuf Zalal, he's never been finished by anybody. And he's been in there with some really good fighters, especially Ilia Topuria, who beat him by decision, even though Zalal did kind of outlast Topuria. So I think Calvin Kattar has victory by decision, primarily. That's his primary path to victory. Even though he's an incredibly dangerous guy on the feet, I still would be really surprised if he put Yusuf Zalal away in any fashion. But Calvin Kattar, he's dangerous. He's gotten plenty of knockouts in the UFC. My favorite of which was his round 3 knockout over Shane Burgos, because that was a really fun, competitive fight, and it took every trait in the book to make that shit happen, and he did it. Now, he was like 31 years old or whatever, but still, that was an incredible win, and it showcased all of his traits. You know, the resilience, the durability, the heart, the cardio, and the danger down the stretch with some vicious fucking uppercuts. But of course, he could also smash your face in with an elbow like he did to Jeremy Stevens. Kattar, I think, is the more physical, damaging fighter. And that could certainly help him win on points as well. You know, I've got his hands being sharper and producing more strikes, but I also think he wins with the better strikes as well. He's definitely got more firepower. And yeah, he's slowing down, and it wouldn't totally surprise me if he fell off a cliff and Zalal was able to take over this fight. I mean, that's pretty much what happened with Zalal versus Billy Quarantillo. And I did not see that one coming at all. Billy just all of a sudden was not there in that fight. But here, Calvin Kattar, I haven't seen him fall off any cliff. And his loss, his one legitimate loss since the 5-round loss to Max Holloway, is not a loss that can be duplicated. And certainly neither is his loss to Max Holloway. So yeah, Calvin Kattar, with what he's done in the past at the featherweight division, I'm thinking he's a little underrated in where he's at right now. And I've got him pulling away with a decision victory using his boxing primarily. And I have bet on Calvin Kattar, but I will bet on the decision lines. Certainly, I think it's both guys' primary path to victory. And of course, that means I'll be looking at the over as well, because I think it covers either guy. And in the main event of the evening, we have Jared Cannonier versus Gregory RoboCop Rodrigues. My prediction for this fight is RoboCop wins, and I've got him winning by knockout. I think a knockout is definitely his most likely path to victory here, even though Jared Cannonier is really fucking tough, and he's still looking really fucking tough into his 40s. But if things aren't going his way against RoboCop, who hits harder than Mike Tyson, it's probably a knockout. Of course, if anybody was to get submitted, it would be Jared Cannonier as well, because RoboCop's an incredible grappler. He's a better grappler than he is a striker, but when you hit like Mike Tyson, you're trending one way as a fighter, and that's towards being a striker. And also, I think as far as winning a decision, I'd have to favor Gregory Rodrigues to win a decision. Rodrigues. And I would pick him to do it with a lot of control and getting it done on the ground. Could happen on the feet. We've seen Cannonier fight that fight, but I think this one on the feet, one way or the other, is going to produce a knockout. I think RoboCop's too dangerous, and on the flip side, I think he's too vulnerable to lose any other way but knockout to Cannonier. Cannonier's shown he is a solid decision fighter, even a 5-round decision fighter at the highest level. But I think he would have to hurt Gregory multiple times to win a decision. I don't think he's outpointing him and winning the small moments. And I certainly don't think there are any points to be scored for him on the mat. So I will look to play Cannonier by knockout because I consider that his primary path to victory. But it's only a hedge against Gregory Rodrigues, which is my bet. It's my bet, and it was also my bet attached to parlays from last week. I just think he's in a good spot to win this one. He does have a button on his chin, which I worry about. He's been knocked out 3 times. Bruno Ferreira, Jordan Williams, and Bruno Lopez, who made it to the UFC a few weeks ago. He knocked him out way back in 2014. But still, even if it's over the course of a decade, he's been knocked out 3 times, and I mean out. And it stands to reason that the majority of his losses in the future, and if he was to suffer a loss in this fight, would probably be by knockout. And that is how I see it. But I've got Rodrigues winning. I think he wins by knockout. Again, he is too dangerous. Cannonier going into his 40s here. He's been able to stand up to the danger of Caio Borralho. And even though he was finished against Nasruddin Imavov, he still looked really tough and durable there up until round 4. But RoboCop hits harder than all those guys put together. And I just don't see him being on the receiving end of this guy's strikes and not collapsing. Especially if he's getting tired and getting teed off on. So that is the prediction. I've got RoboCop being the better man on the feet and getting him out of there. But of course, with no props, I feel comfortable betting on him inside 2-1 because it covers the decision and the submission, which may not be too likely despite his skill set. And like I said, on the flip side, I will look to bet on Jared Cannonier with a little hedge, him winning by knockout, because even though he's been a viable decision fighter, even at the highest level with these 5-round fights, it's just his primary path to victory is knockout here. Considering the weakness of Rodrigues and the danger of Rodrigues, I would be surprised if he won a decision. So there's that. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.